Good morning, this is Shelby Law with the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Wednesday, June 6, 2018. The main fire potential impacts expected for the next few days are really warm temperatures, especially across Utah and Nevada, with very low relative humidities and some gusty winds, particularly over southern Nevada, southern Utah, and into eastern portions of the state of Utah for today and Thursday, and then some gustier winds also moving into far western Nevada by Friday. We'll also see some cooler temperatures with some showers across the north for Wednesday and Thursday, and by this weekend, a cool front moving through portions of the Great Basin. The past 24 hours have been pretty quiet, with generally sunny skies and no lightning activity within the Great Basin. Fire activity for yesterday is shown on this map. We did see a few fires pop up over southwest Idaho. Most of those seem to be controlled and contained at this time, and a few other small fires popping up over Utah. Observed precipitation trends are shown here, with the past 7 days on the left and the past 30 days on the right. It's been a pretty dry couple of weeks, especially over southern and eastern portions of the Great Basin, particularly southern and eastern Utah. A percent of average is shown on the 30-day image, and really we're looking at very dry conditions, much drier than normal for southern and especially eastern Utah all the way up into the Uinta Basin. This dryness is reflected in our current ERC trends, and we can see values above the 80th and even up into the 90th percentile for southern and eastern Utah. And in the Uinta Basin, those values are just about approaching the 97th percentile. And over the higher elevations of central Utah, those values are getting really close to the 10-year record. We'll continue to watch these trends. The forecast shows a continued warm and dry pattern, and so these values are just going to keep increasing really at least through the weekend. Sagebrush live fuel moistures are shown here for a few sites across the Great Basin. The main point here is that for most of the area, sagebrush live fuel moistures are still above normal for the time of year. We had our peak happen a little bit later than normal, and so those values are actually a little bit higher than average for the time of year. Exception to that is over far eastern Utah, where one of our sites in the Uinta Basin is actually setting historical records for the 15-year period of record. So definitely very dry in the eastern half of Utah, eastern third, where elsewhere across the geographic area those live fuel moistures are above normal. The satellite imagery for this morning is showing a little band of clouds moving through northern Utah. This morning that should clear out by this afternoon, as we're seeing an increase in some southwesterly winds across the Great Basin. This will bring some very warm temperatures across much of the region, except for maybe across portions of western and central Idaho, where we could see some of those showers develop later this afternoon. And again, bringing in some gusty winds to southern portions of the region. By this afternoon, we can see some of those higher relative humidities over western and central Idaho, with drier conditions further south. Significant fire potential remains somewhat elevated over southern and eastern portions of the Great Basin, where that long-term dryness is creating very dry fuel conditions. Afternoon wind gusts are shown here on the left, with gusts up to maybe 30 miles an hour possible over southern Nevada and portions of southern Utah. Minimum relative humidities are very low, especially across the far southern border, expected for this afternoon. Single-digit relative humidities across much of the area there, and even down into 5-6 range across the far south. More of the same is expected on Thursday, as we'll see a little bit of moisture coming out ahead of that low off the Canadian coast. They're keeping some showers in the forecast for Idaho, but conditions remain warm, dry, and somewhat breezy across the southern Great Basin. Fire potential remains elevated across the south and east. Wind gusts may not be quite as strong on Thursday as they are expected to be this afternoon, but still highlighting the same general areas: southern Nevada, southwest Utah, and some of the higher elevations there in southern Utah. Minimum relative humidities continue to be very low. Friday looks to be more of the same again, as that low remains off the southern Canadian coast, keeping that dry southwest flow in place across the Great Basin. We could see some winds start to pick up over far western Nevada by Friday and continuing into the weekend ahead of that system. Here we'll see those gusts picking up into the 25 to 30 mile an hour range across far western Nevada. Relative humidities still remain very low across southern and eastern Utah. The 3-day precipitation accumulations are shown here with some precip moving into Idaho today, tomorrow, mainly those higher elevations there out ahead of that low pressure system. By Saturday, we'll see the cold front start to swing through Idaho and even into far northern Nevada. Continued gusty winds with low relative humidities across the south, keeping our significant fire potential elevated in those areas. No high-risk triggers have been issued at this point, but we'll be watching the forecast closely as this wind event moves through the Great Basin. By Sunday, we can see that main low pressure swinging across the northern Rockies and southern Canadian coast there. That will bring that wind, continue to bring the wind into the Great Basin, and it looks like it's going to be fairly dry across the region and should bring temperatures down just a bit as that cold front moves through. Continued dryness on Monday into the first part of next week. Our temperatures will decrease just a bit from the highs we'll see the next couple of days, but we still expect to see dry conditions, especially over Utah and Nevada. That takes us moving into the middle of next week, where we might begin to see a little bit of moisture working its way back up from the southwest. We'll keep an eye on this and see how much of that is expected to move into Utah. Again, this is about a week out, so we'll be watching this forecast as it gets closer. 7-day precipitation totals are shown here, with Utah and Nevada remaining on the dry side, and the main precip, again, just coming to the central Idaho mountains. The extended forecast from the Climate Prediction Center is calling for continued above normal temperatures, especially over Nevada, with below normal precipitation expected over the north, and we'll start to see some of that deeper moisture moving into the southwest U.S. and moving up into southern and eastern Utah. Time frame looking like right now, really by June 13th through the 19th, we could see some of that moisture, so we'll be watching that closely. And this concludes today's fire potential briefing. Please check back tomorrow for the latest updates.